AI governance may have its carbon price moment. When executable exposure becomes too expensive to leave unpriced. In many organizations, AI governance is still treated as overhead. It appears as a line item in compliance budgets, a workstream in legal review, a slide in board updates, a section in vendor due diligence. It is rarely treated as a cost center in its own right, and less often treated as a measurable form of organizational exposure with its own price. This essay argues that the framing is unstable, and that AI governance may be approaching a transition that other categories of risk have already gone through. The transition has a name in environmental economics: pricing the externality. The fourth entry in FO Lens reads this transition from the standpoint of executable exposure. Carbon was once free. For most of industrial history, the cost of emitting carbon was zero to the entity emitting it. The cost was real, it was paid by ecosystems, by future generations, by populations far from the emitter, but it was not paid by the emitter. The externality was not priced. Pricing did not arrive because the science changed. The science had been clear for decades. Pricing arrived because the cost of leaving the externality unpriced became politically, economically, and operationally untenable. Once the externality was priced, three things happened almost immediately. Organizations began to measure what they had previously ignored. Measurement frameworks emerged. Disclosure became a regulatory expectation. And the entities that had built their operations around the assumption of free carbon discovered that a substantial portion of their cost structure was suddenly visible. The same pattern is visible in other categories. Data breaches were once treated as technical incidents. Now they are quantified, disclosed, insured against, and priced into security budgets. Worker injury rates were once treated as the cost of doing business. Now they are tracked, reported, and tied to insurance premiums and regulatory action. The pattern is consistent. A form of exposure exists. It is real but unpriced. At some point, the cost of leaving it unpriced exceeds the cost of measuring and managing it. The category transitions. AI governance may be approaching a similar transition. The unpriced exposure in AI. The cost of AI governance, as currently framed, is the cost of doing it: documentation, policy review, model evaluation, audit preparation. This is the cost an organization sees on its budget. The cost an organization does not yet see is the cost of not doing it well enough. That cost has a name. It is the cost of unproven execution. Unproven execution happens whenever an AI output produces an action, and the organization cannot demonstrate, at the moment of execution, that the action was admissible under the current authority, current state, and current conditions. The action may have been correct. The model may have been accurate. The approval trail may have been complete. None of that constitutes proof of execution eligibility, in the operational sense that a regulator, auditor, or counterparty would recognize. When unproven execution produces a problem, a wrong transaction, an inappropriate disclosure, an unauthorized state change, a regulatory violation, the cost of the cleanup is borne after the fact. The investigation, the reversal, the explanation to regulators, the customer-facing remediation, the internal review, the legal exposure, all of these are paid downstream. These costs exist today. They are simply not aggregated into a single visible category. They are spread across legal budgets, incident response, customer service, compliance overhead, and reputational recovery. What is approaching is the consolidation of these costs into a recognizable line, the price of unproven execution. Why this consolidation is becoming more plausible? Three forces appear to be moving in the same direction. Regulatory expectations are sharpening. Across jurisdictions and sectors, regulatory expectations are moving toward lifecycle risk management, documentation, monitoring, and evidence of control. The burden of proof is shifting from, "we have a policy," to, we can show what happened, when, under what authority, against what state. Audit standards are catching up. Major auditing bodies are developing frameworks for AI assurance that go beyond model documentation. The direction of these frameworks is toward operational evidence: what was executed, by what system, under what permission, in what state. Insurance markets are beginning to look for ways to price it. As AI-related incidents accumulate, insurers are developing the actuarial basis to evaluate coverage. Coverage prices, when they emerge at scale, become a market signal. They translate diffuse, qualitative risk into a quantitative line item. The absence of admissibility evidence can become a premium-bearing characteristic of an organization, not just a governance gap. Each of these forces, alone, is significant. Together, they create the conditions under which unproven execution can acquire a price. What pricing changes? Once an externality is priced, organizations begin to optimize against it. This is not a moral statement. It is a structural one. Pricing carbon caused organizations to measure emissions, redesign processes, and disclose performance. The disclosures became investor relevant. The investor relevance became board relevant. The board relevance changed where capital flowed. Pricing data breach exposure caused organizations to invest in security operations, breach detection, and incident response. Security stopped being a back-office cost and became a measurable operational discipline. If unproven execution acquires a similar price, the same pattern follows. Organizations will measure executable exposure. They will produce evidence that actions opened under current authority, current state, and current conditions. They will invest in the operational layer that produces that evidence. The artifacts of that layer, permits, attestations, evidence packs, will move from technical novelty to compliance expectation. The infrastructure that supports this will not be optional. It will be the cost of doing business in regulated and high-stakes domains. What this is not. This essay is not predicting a specific regulatory event. It is not arguing that any particular jurisdiction will move first. It is not claiming that the transition is imminent in months rather than years. The argument is structural. The conditions that produced pricing in other externality categories are forming in AI governance. Whether the transition arrives in 3 years or 10, the direction is the same, from overhead toward priced exposure. Organizations that are already producing operational evidence of execution eligibility will be aligned with the transition when it arrives. Organizations that are not will face a choice: build that capability under regulatory pressure, or absorb the cost of unproven execution as it accumulates. Carbon was unpriced until it was not. Data breach was a technical issue until it was not. Worker safety was the cost of business until it was not. In each case, the transition was not driven by sudden moral clarity. It was driven by the gradual realization that an unpriced externality was not free, it was simply being paid by parties without leverage to demand otherwise. AI governance is in the early stages of the same arc. The exposure exists. The cost is real. The category is forming. The pressure to price it is increasing. The organizations that prepare for this transition will not be the ones with the most policies. They will be the ones with the most evidence, of what executed, when, under what authority, against what state. That evidence is not produced by accuracy. It is produced at the execution boundary.